Hi, this is Remembering the Past, the show where we talk about people who've died recently who've had a profound effect on our history, our society, or our culture. Tonight we're going to start out with Robert Loggia, who died recently at the age of 85. Great actor. Nice Sicilian boy from Staten Island. He specialized in playing mafiosi roles, mob guys, and generally wired up bad guys, although he did have a couple of notable roles outside that genre. Here's a brief report on Robert Loggia's death from TMZ.
TMZ reported the veteran actor Robert Loggia, whose portrayal of a crusty detective in the 1985 Joe Esterhaus film Jagged Edge earned him an Academy Award nomination, died Friday at his home in Los Angeles. Major film credits, including An Officer and a Gentleman, Scarface, Prizzi's Honor, and Big. He was most recognizable for playing tough-talking heavies in film and TV. He also played surly toughs with a tongue-in-cheek panache.
You can't go wrong playing those guys with a tongue-in-cheek panache. Well, as I said, he also had some different roles besides bad guys. One of his roles was in a short-lived TV series called The Cat. He was really good in this. He was Thomas Hewart Edward Cat. It was a 1966 show on NBC where he played a cat burglar who was essentially helping solve crimes. It was sort of the takeoff on the Cary Grant Hitchcock To Catch a Thief thing where they adapted it for television. It was a pretty good show, but didn't last more than one season.
T. Hewart Edward Cat.
Robert Loggia started in the theater in the 50s, and then he went into television to do stuff like The Cat in the 60s. And then he decided to go back to the theater, which probably was not the best career move because he could have moved right into movies from television, but it took him about a decade before he figured that out. When he finally figured it out, he was in some dreck like Psycho 2, but then he made it An Officer and a Gentleman, and my favorite role, Big, where he's playing the piano in FAO Schwartz with Tom Hanks with his feet by dancing. We talked about that when we did the FAO Schwartz podcast.
Let's check out piano lessons. 3 years. I do. Every day after school. What department did you say you were in?
Computers.
Computers? Yeah. Just saved me a trip to the gym, son.
And he did a lot of big movies like Scarface and Prizzi's Honor. And then, ironically, he moved back to television and he was in The Sopranos. And it reminded him of growing up in New York City. And here he talks about that.
The family feeling on The Sopranos is really quite unique. And it's quite a different venue from The Godfather. Prizzi's Honor, which I did, was Prizzi's Honor, directed by the great John Huston. Certainly great to do, but it's a different venue, a different reality. The reality of The Sopranos is the way I remember it. In New York, you were brought up cheek to jowl with the gangsters. They just wanted enough to wet their beak, as they put it, to control the street. The booking parlor was next to the drugstore. And Pope D'Alessio asked me, "Hey kid, you want to work for me?" I said, "No, thank you. You got to go to college and all that." It tried to be a credit to Sicilians for a change.
Well, Robert Loggia turned out to be quite a credit to Sicilians. We're going to move on now to Dolph Schayes, who died recently at the age of 87, one of the legends of the NBA, one of the 50 greatest players in NBA history, a nice Jewish boy from the Bronx to Whit Clinton High School who became a legend in the NBA. Here's NBA.com with a biography of Dolph Schayes.
Dolph Schayes spent 16 illustrious seasons in the NBA, from the league's inaugural year to its emergence as a major sporting attraction. At 6'8", he was among the taller players in the league, but he had an outside shot as accurate as most guards. Schayes played nearly his entire career with the Syracuse Nationals, leading them to an NBA championship in 1955. He followed the Nationals to Philadelphia in his final season, and he remains the Sixers' all-time leading rebounder. A 12-time All-Star, Hall of Famer, and one of the league's 50 greatest players, Dolph Schayes helped build the foundation for the growth of the NBA.
Dolph Schayes of Syracuse, this former NYU star, has truly become one of the greatest all-around players in the league. He's led the Nationals in scoring ever since joining them 6 years before. The familiar 4 on his jersey has become the number to watch whenever Syracuse is playing.
Schayes arrived in the spotlight at a young age when he took the court for NYU at New York's fabled arena.
Madison Square Garden was the capital of the basketball world. Every great team, every great player played at Madison Square Garden in the 40s. Every game was a sellout. It was one of the great thrills of my life to be in Madison Square Garden before 18,000 people at the age of 16. I was tall and I was a pretty good basketball player. NYU needed a center. I was just at the right place at the right time. At that time, NYU was like North Carolina, was like Syracuse, had great teams, and we played basketball the way it was supposed to be played, New York style.
A native of New York City, Dolph had developed his game on the local playgrounds, and he was a perfect fit at NYU.
All of our players came from the boroughs in New York. It was Bronx and Brooklyn and Queens and Long Island. And we played in the schoolyard. And when you play in the schoolyard, to use basketball terms, you'd set picks, you'd give and go, you kept moving, you kept the floor open. We all played the same style, so when the coach threw out the ball, we knew instinctively what to do. And that carried on into my professional career.
The two rival pro leagues were about to merge, but both were trying to sign Schayes.
The New York Knickerbockers drafted me number one, and a team in Syracuse drafted me number one. But the New York Knickerbockers offered me $5,000, which, today for number one draft choice, that's not very much. But the Syracuse Nationals offered me $7,500. The difference made me play in Syracuse because professional basketball wasn't considered a strong professional league. And I only figured to play for perhaps a year or two. Then the league became very strong with a lot of great college ball players. And so that 1 or 2 years became forever.
There goes Dolph, and he's terrific.
I was one of the first power forwards, which meant that I was able to take bigger men outside. And with my movement, basketball is a game of movement. So I moved, and I moved continuously.
Now George King moves it down court. Over to Schayes, whose one-hand marksmanship is terrific.
My bread and butter was a great outside shot.
Dolph was an extraordinary all-around player. At team play, rebounding, and shooting, he's always terrific.
And a drive to the basket.
And Dolph used those tools to become an explosive offensive force for the Syracuse Nationals.
Very simple, very effective, and that's all you need in basketball. A couple of simple things to make you a great player.
Schayes passing behind his back to Seymour, who puts it away.
If I set my outside shot, player would come up on me. That's what I wanted him to do. Try to stop me from shooting from outside. Then when it came up on me, I'd go by him. I'd drive by him. And I kept working on an outside shot in order to become a more aggressive and a more complete player.
And he was a complete player elected to the Hall of Fame in 1972. We're going to move on now to our feature tonight, M.Roland Nachman, who died recently at the age of 91. He was a lawyer who lost his most famous case. He was a nice Jewish boy from Montgomery, Alabama, who went to Harvard, and then he became quite prominent back in Alabama in Montgomery legal circles. And in 1960, he took on the case of L.B. Sullivan, a Montgomery city commissioner who brought suit against the New York Times for an advertisement Times ran on March 29, 1960, and it became the most famous libel trial of the 20th century in the United States. It had profound implications for freedom of the press and for the civil rights movement. And actually, Nachman won at every level until the case went to the Supreme Court in 1964. Here's Thinkwell video on the important implications of Sullivan versus the New York Times, the decision that was handed down in 1964 by the Supreme Court.
The right to criticize political leaders and governmental officials is a fundamental principle of democratic government. It helps keep officials from abusing power. It helps inform citizens so that they can go to the polls and vote for candidates who best represent their views. It provides a check, perhaps an essential one, on government power. But what if the press prints falsehoods? What if it prints lies that unfairly hurt a person's reputation? What if it sets out to destroy a candidate or an office holder? Should it have a protected constitutional right to do these things? Does it? These are the issues the Supreme Court addressed in 1964 in New York Times v. Sullivan. Now, the Sullivan case grew out of the civil rights movement in the South in the 1960s. In February of 1960, a student-led sit-in movement had started in which African-American students sat down at lunch counters to protest racial segregation, and they refused to leave until they were served. On March 29, 1960, a full-page advertisement appeared in the New York Times. It was called "Heed Their Rising Voices," and the ad was signed by 64 members of the clergy as well as other people of prominence. The ad complained that the police in Montgomery, Alabama had ringed the campus of Alabama State College and had padlocked the dining hall in order to intimidate the protesters, that Dr. Martin Luther King had been arrested 7 times and that acts of violence had been directed at the protesters. It appealed for funds to support the student movement, the struggle for the right to vote, and the legal defense of Dr. King. In response to this ad, L.B. Sullivan, who was one of 3 white elected city commissioners of Montgomery, Alabama, sued the New York Times for libel, the printing of falsehoods. Although he was never mentioned by name in the ad, he maintained that the words police in the ad referred to him since he was the commissioner who supervised the Montgomery Police Department. And it turned out the ad contained some factual errors. The police had not ringed the campus, and Dr. King had only been arrested 4 times, not 7. In addition, in one place, the ad alleged that the protesting students had sang "My Country 'Tis of Thee" on the state capitol steps when they had actually sung the national anthem. However, an all-white jury found the New York Times guilty of libel for publishing the ad and awarded $500,000 to Sullivan in damages. The New York Times appealed. $500,000 was a fortune in 1964, even for the New York Times. The lawsuit was part of an effort by the white leadership in Montgomery to destroy the civil rights movement. If the verdict was upheld, the New York Times and other newspapers and media outlets might be forced to stop accepting ads from civil rights groups, depriving the civil rights movement of a valuable fundraising tool. However, the Supreme Court overturned the libel verdict in a unanimous decision. Justice Brennan wrote the opinion, and early on he wrote the following: "We consider this case against the background of a profound national commitment to the principle that debate on public issues should be uninhibited, robust, and wide open, and that it may well include vehement, caustic, and sometimes unpleasantly sharp attacks on government and public officials." He dismissed the mistakes in the ad, noting that constitutional protection didn't depend upon the truth or the popularity or the social utility of the ideas and beliefs which were expressed. The court was particularly worried that requiring truth as a defense would lead to what it called self-censorship. If the verdict was upheld, Brennan wrote, people would not feel free to criticize government. This is what he said for the court: "The pall of fear and timidity imposed upon those who would give voice to public criticism is an atmosphere in which the First Amendment freedoms cannot survive." Now, did this mean that all libel law was unconstitutional? No, it didn't. It did mean that for a public official to prove libel, the Constitution imposed a strict 3-part standard. The standard was this: in order for a public official to win a libel suit, he had to prove that the statement made was, first, a defamatory falsehood, second, that it related to his official conduct, and third, and most importantly, that it was made with actual malice, meaning with knowledge that it was false or with reckless disregard for whether it was false or not. Now, in concurring opinions, Justices Black, Douglas, and Goldberg argued that the Supreme Court hadn't gone far enough in protecting the press. Well, Justices Black and Douglas argued that the New York Times had a, quote, absolute, unconditional constitutional right to publish the advertisement. The Sullivan standard of actual malice makes it very difficult for public officials to win libel suits against the press. It grants the press a great deal of legal protection for criticism of governmental officials.
Even though Sullivan v. New York was an attempt by Montgomery city officials to scuttle the civil rights movement, M.R. Nachman personally was a civil rights liberal and also was a supporter of freedom of the press. As a lawyer, he thought he had a strong legal case, and he told his daughter, either I win this case and they win $500,000, or they will change the law of the land. And that's exactly what happened. Well, I'm going to close on that note. I want to thank my producer and IT genius, Sid Tepps. We're going to close tonight with a brief mention of Scott Weiland, who died recently at the age of 48. He was the longtime lead singer of the Stone Temple Pilots. Now, I got to be honest with you, I'm not a Stone Temple Pilots kind of guy, and I didn't want to play a snip of Vaseline or Interstate Love Song. It's not my kind of music, but Scott Weiland did make a Christmas album, so because it's that time of year, as a tribute, we'll close with one of his holiday songs. And personally, I don't think he's any Johnny Mathis or Andy Williams on this one.
It's the most wonderful time of the year, with the kids jingle belling and